Okay. So we've done our basic file upload and we've enabled the permissions we needed so that we could run this on AWS. But now we want to integrate file uploads into the rest of our music library site. So if we go back to our home page, what I want to be able to do is make it so that when we are adding or editing, when we're adding or editing, that we also have the ability to upload. And if we're editing and there's already a file here, I want to be able to display it. So first thing we're going to do is I actually want to modify the database so that we have a place where we can store the names of the files and attach them to each musician. If you go into your Lesson 11 folder on Blackboard, there's a simple script here that we want to run in our database, and it's this script right here. So we want to alter the musicians table by adding a column called photo. So I'm going to open up my SQL workbench. I'm going to log into my AWS server. I'm going to run my use command. Then I'm going to have a quick look at the musicians table. So actually, we don't need to do this. We actually have a photo column already. So that's good. So I wasn't sure couldn't remember whether we had that column or not. So we already have a photo column, which is great. I don't need another one, which is fine. Now, I've also included, I have grabbed from the musicians' websites, I've taken some photos of the bands that are in my database. I don't have all of them, but I have some of them. So if you want, you can download my photos, or if you've probably put your own list of musicians in your own database, you can go online and quickly, if you want to download some photos of each musician, you can do that. If you want to just grab mine, even if they're not the right photos, or use any random photos on your computer just to test the file upload functionality, that's totally fine. So we're going to do that. I'm also recognizing there's one other thing from a security point of view we didn't quite cover that we'll want to do before I end for today. So we've got the column. So now what I want to do is I want to open up our musiciandetails.php page. So on our musician details, in our form that starts down on line 44, I want to add the encoding type attribute because we want to add a file upload box to this form. So we're going to add the encoding type equals multi-part form data to the form tag that's already here. So this way our form can also process file uploads. And then right now we have a regular input box for the photo. I'm going to take out, so if I'm editing, for example, right now, click on Pearl Jam, just shows a blank. I want to change this to an upload box. So I'm going to take out this value attribute, and instead, I'm going to set the type attribute equal to file. So that text box is going to get converted into a file upload box. So two changes. We've added the encoding type on line 44, and we've changed the file type for our photo input. So if you're following along, you can go ahead and make those 2 changes on your musician details page. I'll leave my code up for a minute. And then what we're going to need to do is on our save page, we're going to need to write the code to check if there was a file uploaded. And if there was, we'll then need to check that it's the right kind of file, give it a unique name, and we're going to want to save that. So I'm going to jump over and open up our savemusician.php file. If you need me to put this one back up, just let me know in the chat or turn on your mic and ask me to come back here. So I'm going to go to the Save Musician page. So on our save page, we've got all the code. We've sort of ignored the photo except for here. So our photo, rather than using the post collection, it's actually going to come from the files collection, because photo is no longer a text input that we access through the posts. It's now a files object that we access through the files object. So we're going to make that change here on line 24. And then before we save anything to the database, we're going to need to do our checking. If there is a photo, and if there is it the right type? Is it going to be an image or a JPEG or a PNG? And if it's not, then we're going to have to show an error message. So after our checking, we're now going to do our photo upload check. So we'll say if our photo if not empty, we'll try this. So meaning there is a file name that got uploaded. And now, then we'll set a few variables. First, we'll set the TMP name. So let's get the current location of the uploaded file. And then we'll check the type using the MIME content type method we used earlier. So this doesn't check the file based on the extension, it checks the file based on the actual MIME content. We can say if type is not an image / JPEJ and type is also not equal to, then we want to display an error message. And again, we'll set OK equal to false in this case. Now, the user doesn't have to upload a file. So if the file name is empty, that's fine. Mind you, the one other issue we'll have to make a quick change down here as well, I think, but we'll try it. So let's try this first. What happens if I edit an existing musician and I upload something that is not a JPEG and not a PNG? I should get this error message and everything should stop. So let's try it out first. So I'll just refresh. My text box turns to a browse button. And if I pick a text document, so I should pick an actual text document or PDF. So I'll go back and pick a PDF. And I get this error, not a valid file. Okay. If I don't choose anything, then I can save. Okay, so our validation is working. So again, here's the code. But the other thing we want to do now is say else. So if we do have a file, an uploaded file name, and it is either a JPEG or a PNG, we want to use the session to uniquely name the uploaded file and save to the, we'll create a folder inside of our images called musicians. Not even sure if we have an images folder. We don't. I could create it right in images, but typically the images folder in the root there would be like images that are displayed on the site, whereas these are file uploads. So we're going to have to create these folders. So I'm going to call session start. Actually, let's see here. We'll call session start for now. And we'll say photo is equal to session ID, same code we used previously. So the original file name with the session ID in front of it. And then we can call move uploaded file from our temporary location. We want to save this to img/musicians. With our new name. And then this photo variable now also has the name. Now I don't have these directories, so I also need to create an image musicians directory. So I'm going to make a new directory called img first, and then inside of img, I'm going to make another directory called musicians. So this way, the files uploaded by the users are separate from any other images that we might have in the website. So now I'm going to try this out. So I'll make sure my folder names here match my folder names in this code. And I'm going to go to the browser and give it a try. So I've already got an image for Pearl Jam on my computer. So it was in that zip file I uploaded to Blackboard. So I'm going to upload, it is a valid JPG file. So when I save, okay, we don't get an error. So now the question is, what actually happened? If I go and look, inside my IMG folder and musicians, now I've got, here's my Pearl Jam JPEG with my session ID on the front of it. Now, when I go to edit the image, so it's working, but it doesn't actually show up. So we'll have to deal with that as well. What about when I add a new musician? So let's say I'm going to add Green Day. Find the record label. So they're on Reprise. So I'm going to browse. I have their logo as well. I'll put in their city. So I want to see if the file upload worked when I'm adding, and it does. So if we look in the database now, if I run my musician query again, not only are the files being saved, but now the name of the image, including the session ID, is getting saved to the proper record. So the last thing we want to do, actually, I guess we could do a couple things, is when I go into edit now, if there is an image, it should show. So even though I've uploaded an image for Pearl Jam and I've uploaded an image for Green Day, the user doesn't actually have any idea that it worked because they can't actually see the images. So we also want to add some code on our details page. Okay, sorry, Jeffrey, I just saw your question. Session start. Anytime we want to access the current session, so the session started automatically on the web server. We don't have to do anything to create it. But if you want to access the current session, we have to call session start before you can use it in any way. So we used it, for example, on our login validate page. When we had a valid login attempt, we had to call session start. And we said this was required before you could read or write a session variable. So here we were taking the user's ID from the database and storing it in a session variable. So we had to call session start. So anytime we want to use the session, we have to call session start first. Yes, in fact, we can do it, and we will actually be moving it to the header. Yes, because if you call session start twice on the same page, it'll actually give you an error. So the easiest thing is just call session start right at the top, and we will want to do that. So what I'm going to do here, after my last field set, is I'm going to put on a set of PHP tags. Now, we're already getting the photo. So when we run the query, when we're editing, we're already checking. And if there is a photo in the database, we're already going to have that populated into our photo variable. So in my database, I've got photo values for Green Day and Pearl Jam, but not for any of the other musicians. So now I'm going to check and say if our photo is not empty, we're going to want to display, oops. In this case, I'm going to echo out an image tag. And the photos are going to live in img/musicians/ and then I'm going to close my single quote, and I'm going to append on the photo variable, and then open a single quote, double quote, alt equals. So we want to display the image tag in this case. Now we're only doing this if there is an image. Now we'll probably also want to add a bit of styling to it. We may have to reposition it, but let's try it and see what this looks like. So I've just added this block of code that's highlighted in blue. So how does this look? So now if I refresh, when I have an image, it shows up. Obviously, it doesn't look great, but it's here. When I load Pearl Jam, here's my image. If I load one of the other musicians, if there is no image, nothing shows up. And of course, I have the browse button, so I have the ability to change it. Now, I might want to format this a little better. Doesn't look great. Like this. I want it maybe aligned over here, and I want my save button down below. So in this case, I'll echo out. So a div. I offset it 2 columns. And then end the div afterwards. We'll see how this looks. So that's better. It's now aligned and my button is down below. Now we're going to have the same issue. If I run this code on the server, I'm going to have the same problem. So to run it on AWS, I'm going to need to create my IMG directory and the musicians directory, and then I'm also going to need to enable write permissions on this musicians folder. So I'm going to try this and make sure it also works on AWS. So I'm going to go back to AWS. I'm going to create an IMG directory. My IMG directory doesn't have to be writable, but the musicians directory inside does. And I'm going to change these file permissions to be 757. So the owner can read, write, and execute, and so can the public. So now I'm going to upload my musician details and my save page. And I'm going to try these out on the live server as well. So I'll go back to my home, whoops. Go back to my home page here. Guess I've got a bunch of files I've never uploaded, so I should probably upload those. Yeah, I think it's my live version was pretty out of date, so bear with me. And of course, I need my CSS. Okay. So now when I go to view, so that file exists locally, I'm going to need to re-upload it. So I'll go and grab my copy, my Pearl Jam photo. And now when I go into edit on the server, my photo shows up. Same thing, I only have a local copy of my Green Day photo. So I can add it and it will show up for me. I can try one more. I have a photo for 21 Pilots. So I'm going to add that one too. And I see a question in the chat. I'll look in just a moment. Justin, you tried to add 2 images, both of the same file type. Are you doing this locally or are you doing this on AWS? You can turn your mic on and answer the question. Okay, on AWS. And check in FileZilla whether those files actually got uploaded. So this will tell you, that'll tell you if the files are actually there. Okay, so if the file is not showing up, then when you should get the alt tag showing up. So you could right click it and choose view image, and that will then show you in your browser the full path to the image. So that may help you debug it. And if it's not showing, it'll show you what the path is that it's looking for. Yep. So this is the code we've added to the save page. And notice the word destination here. This is not part of the code where it's grayed out. This is just a code prompt from PHP Storm. So you don't type the word destination : here. Okay, Justin, maybe when we're done the live stream, you can share your screen and we can look at it. The one other thing we could do if we wanted to is we could create little thumbnails, or we could show these images as small thumbnails in the list. So where there is an image, it would show up here. So I'm just going to modify our musicians page in order to do that. So I'm going to open up my musicians page. We're almost done with this piece. There are some other authentication pieces we should be adding as well. So on my musicians page, first thing I'm going to do, I don't need to, but I'm going to, rather than have my database connection here, would be more efficient if I acquire my database. So what I'm going to do is, first in my table, I'm just going to put an empty column heading at the end, just an empty TH. And then after my city column, but before my delete column, I'm going to open up an opening and closing TD tag. So I'll do it this way. I'm going to have the opening TD tag. And I'm going to put another echo command down at the bottom. So we're going to break this into 2 echo commands, because I want to have an if statement here that will show a photo if there is one. So we're going to say if not empty, our value photo. Then we're going to want to print out the image, just like we did on our musician details page. it's in our IMG/musicians. We're going to print out the photo. We'll see how this looks. We'll need to adjust it a little bit because it's going to be much too big. So if there is a photo, we want to display it here. So what does this look like when I run it? Just going to try it out. I think you can see the code change. Now I'm not seeing it locally because I've changed all the paths to my images in the database. So what I probably want to do is just upload this file and run it on AWS right now. So I'm going to upload my musicians file. And let's see if that worked. Okay, something broke. So let's see, what is this looking for? IMG. So it can't find the image file. That's interesting. So locally, I only have Green Day and Pearl Jam, but those should be showing up for me. So let's see why they're not. Oh, they're not showing up because I have a different session ID, because this is my local session. I did figure out why they're not showing here, however. Because I didn't upload my database file. Okay, so the images do show up on AWS, but obviously they're much too large. So I'm going to add a class to these to shrink them down. So I'm also going to add a class here, which I'll create in my CSS file. I'll call it thumbnail. And then I'll define a thumbnail class in our CSS. So inside of our styles, maybe we'll make a width of 75 pixels. We'll see how that looks. So I'm going to re-upload my musicians page, re-upload my styles.css. And now I just get the little thumbnails of the image. So the Green Day image is at a different aspect ratio, so it's a little taller. But if I go in and edit, I get the full picture. Okay, I want to push all my code up to GitHub. That's basically everything we need. The musicians page, sure. Yeah, the code is a bit complex here. So this is what was added. So lines 32 to 38 are all new. Before we just had the city column on line 31 and then the delete column on line 39. So everything in the middle here is new so that we can display those thumbnails. Now we should do a couple of other things. We didn't quite realize that we hadn't covered them. My apologies, the break. So I thought there was some more work we had done with authentication that I had planned to do last week, and then last week's class got canceled. But we need to do a little bit more with it, which I will show you. So I'm going to push what I've done so far up to GitHub so you can also get the code or check it there. Just going to take out my password. And push. So if you need any of the code, you can reference it on GitHub. Now, the one thing that I guess I hadn't quite realized we hadn't done with our application is we had built register and login pages, and those are functioning. We did those back in our last class together, but there's still no security check. So all of our pages, they're still public. So as an anonymous user, I can still add, edit, delete. There's nothing requiring me to be logged in. So I want to change that, and I also want to make some changes in our navigation bar, depending on whether our user is logged in or whether they're anonymous. So the first thing we want to do is, Jeffrey, this is now where we're going to implement your suggestion. So in our header, I want to make some changes. I want to, so we'll open up the header file. And maybe right at the top, we can call session start. This way we don't need to call session start anywhere else. So any page that has our header can access the user session. So now in my nav bar, I want to change this. So we're going to have our view all link. I'm going to take out the add new, but I'm going to create links that say register and log in. And when a user logs in, we're going to hide those links and we're going to have them show their username and log out. We're also going to move these other links over here. Then we're going to need to deal with the links on this page, so only an authenticated user sees them. An anonymous user just gets a read-only version of this page. This is something you'll need to do in your assignments. So I'm going to take these two links over here. I'm going to change the first link to go to register.php. And I'm going to change the second one to go to login.php. So in here, I'm going to move, let's see, move my closing PHP tag down to the bottom. And first we're going to say if empty, our session user ID. So if there is no user logged in, we want to print these links. So when a user is anonymous, we want to show the links register and log in. Else, if they are logged in, we want to show two different links. If they're logged in, we want to show a link that says log out. And this one isn't going to go anywhere. I'll explain what that's going to do after. So an anonymous user will see register and log in. An authenticated user is going to see just this empty link for now and then log out. So let's see what happens when I run the code like this. So I'm not logged in. Sorry, I am logged in. So it shows me log out. Whoops. We don't actually have a logout page. We never created one. So we need to build that page. Let me just try this in a private browser or in Chrome where I know I'm not logged in. So in Chrome, I'm anonymous, so it shows me register and log in. In Firefox, I actually have a session from before, so I see log out. So we're going to want to build this page. I also want to push this link over here. And my register and login link, I want to move. So what I'm going to do is actually create a separate UL. So over here, I'm going to close that first UL tag. And I'm going to make a second UL with the class navbarNav. And I'll also use ML auto. That will write justify the second set of links. So I basically get two separate lists. So I've added lines 30 and 31. And what that will give me now, so if I refresh, it now pushes my logout link over to the right. In Chrome, where I'm anonymous, my register and login links are now over here. So I need to build this logout page that will end my session. Because right now when I click logout, get a 404 error because our logout page doesn't exist. So I want to, okay. Walt, can you give me a specific question? Okay, yes, and what about the header? We're trying to make it dynamic, so anonymous users see different links from authenticated users. So we now have an if statement. We've got some logic in the header that will show certain links and hide other links depending on if the user has logged into our site or not. So that's what this block of code in here. Okay. So we've got our nav bar, but right now I have no way to log out. So in Firefox, I'm actually logged into the site because it doesn't show me register and log in. Right now, the only way I would have to log out is to close my browser. So we need to build a simple logout page that ends the user's session and takes them back to the login screen. And then when that happens, this logout button will disappear and register and log in will come back in its place. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're going to build a simple logout page. I'm going to make a new PHP file called logout. So we want to end the authenticated session and redirect to the login page. So first we call session unset. This removes, whoops. First we have to call session start. Did I draw that circle or did somebody else draw it? And then we call session destroy. So that will get rid of our session user ID variable. And then we can call header location and take the user back to the login page. Don't include this word string colon, that's just a code prompt, just a hint. So if I log in and then click log out, my navigation bar should change. So let's try this out. I'll try it in Chrome. Actually, I guess I can try it in Firefox first. So I'm moving around in Firefox and notice it says log out on every page. So I have an active session ID. Unset just removes any variables. Destroy actually removes the session. So in unset, the session is still active. We're just getting rid of any variables we put into the session. Destroy removes it all from memory. So now if I click log out, notice I'm back to the login screen and now my logout link is gone and my register and login links are back. If I log in again, probably help if I put in a valid login. Which of course I don't remember. I may have to create a new account. Oh, I wrote it on the board in class, I think. There, okay. So now when I'm logged in, register and login go away and log out comes back. The other thing I could do when a user logs in is we could also store their email address in a second session variable, and then we could display their email address here. Many websites do this. So I'm going to do that too. So in my validate page, we've already got a session variable for their ID. I'll create maybe another one for their username. I'm going to add line 23 on my validate page. So when someone logs in, we're going to store both their user ID and their username. And then we can display the username now in the header when somebody logs in. So I'm going to save that. And that was that. We have that one link in the header that we're not using beside logout. I'm going to use that to display the username. So we'll go back to our header. And in here, we can display. I'll have to append it in because it's a variable. So inside of that, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to look like a link. But by adding this in here, the username will now show up in the header. Yep, just 1 second, Jeffrey. I'm just going to test this and then I'll put logout back. Whoops. We shouldn't get it from here on validate. We can just use our variable called username. We already have the username. We don't need to select it from the database. I will put the code back in a sec, Jeffrey. I want to make sure this is right. So we just set it equal to the username variable that we already have. I'll log out again and try one more time. So if I log in as test@test.com, it now shows me this. So again, we just set line 23, take the username, stick it in a session variable. That way we can display it on every page. Yes, I will go back to the logout. So our nav bar is now dynamic depending on whether our user's logged in or not. But everything in the website is still public. Even if you don't log in, you can add a musician, you can edit a musician, you can delete a musician. So we still need to control access to these things. Sure, Rebecca, no problem. I will leave this up. Let me know when you're done and let me know if you need me to scroll. So basically the new section starts on line 30. Sorry. So from line 30 down to line 50, these are our new parts of the nav bar. So if we want to control access, okay, great. So only an authenticated user can change data. We're going to need to do a few things. On this page, we want to hide the links. So the add link, the name shouldn't be links, and delete. These should only be available if somebody's logged in. And then on this page, on the details, save and delete pages, all of those should only be available if the user has logged in. So we can write a little authentication check and include it on all of those pages. So here's how we're going to do that. So we basically, so this page is a visible page with our header. So we're going to start here on our musician details. Let's see how we control access to it. I'm going to make, because we're going to have to repeat this code on several pages, doesn't make sense to put the same block of code repeating. I'm going to make a separate file that will do an authentication check, and we can just include that file on all of the private pages. So I'll make a new PHP file, which I will call auth.php. Nice short name. We don't need any HTML on this file. It's going to be PHP code only. This is going to be our authentication check. Return to login if user is anonymous. So I'll say we will call session start in the header first, so we don't need it on this page. So we're going to check if our session variable called user ID is empty. That means the user's not logged in. Either they never logged in or their session has timed out, but they no longer have access to change anything. So if that's the case, we want to take them back to the login page. So now any page that we want to be private, meaning only a logged in user can see, we can first include our header, and then we can include or require this page. And before the rest of the code runs on that page, we're going to check if, hey, if this user's not logged in, there's no ID here, we're not going to let them see this page. We're going to take them back to login and we're going to exit. We're going to stop executing the rest of the code. So we want to require this page on our musician details, our save musician, and our delete musician page. If you're not logged in, you shouldn't be able to access any of those. So let's see how this works. I'll leave the code up for just a second, but where we're going to go next is we're going to go to our musician details, and we're going to require this file. So we'll go over to our details page, the page we use for adding and editing. So we've got the header at the top. So right underneath it, before we do any of this other code, so this page is only for authenticated users. So if we require, and I don't necessarily need the brackets here, if we require auth, this is going to do our security check. So an anonymous user is right away going to get kicked out and sent back to login. If a user is authenticated, then the code will just keep executing. So I've just added this little bit of code. Let's see how it works. Okay, so I've added lines 8 and 9. So in Firefox, I'm logged in. And we can tell because my navbar has my email address and it says log out. So I can click on add a new musician, form loads. Or I could edit, form loads. If I jump over to Chrome, Now, when I go to add a new musician, notice I'm anonymous, right? My nav bar says register and log in. So it immediately checks that session variable, says, there's no user ID, so you have to go and log in first. Same thing if I go to edit, it immediately sends me to the login screen. So pretty simple way to secure the access. Just check the session variable. Now I want to do the same thing on our save and delete pages. Those are public pages. So I want to require this here as well. So I'm going to go to my Save Musician page. Now we don't actually have our header here, but I'm going to include it. So what I'm going to do is take out the HTML at the top. And I will require first the header. And then the auth. So my save page is now private. So somebody can't in their browser type my domain /savemusician.php and load the save page, or they can't send a request to it through their own form or through an HTTP tool like Postman. We need to put the same security check on our delete page. So this is a hidden page. The user never sees it, so we never bothered adding our header here, but we're going to add it here as well. The delete is now private too. Now we don't want to put this on every single page. Our register, login, save register, validate, all of those pages have to be public because we need anonymous users to be able to sign up and log in. We also don't want to put an authentication check on our home page, and we don't want this check on our musicians page, but we'll have to make a couple other changes there and then we're done. So I won't keep it too much longer. And you'll need to do this in your assignment. So in your project, one of the requirements is if you're building the content management system, the entire control panel has to be private. All the pages in there, once somebody registers and logs in, they can access those pages, but they can't get in to change content if they're not authenticated. If you're building option A, where you're extending assignment 1, same thing with your application. The pages for saving, the form, and the delete page all should be private. But what about our kind of list page? So it's fine, I see these links in Firefox because I'm logged in and I have access to do all these things. But in Chrome, as an anonymous user, yes, I'm blocked from doing these things, but I can see these links, which isn't great. Probably better to just show me a read-only version where I don't see add and delete, and I don't see the musician names as links. So we're going to add some logic around these links to show or hide them, again, just like we did up here, depending if the user's logged in or not. So it will be one page with sort of two different views of it. An authenticated user has the links to change things. An anonymous user, they can see the data, but there's no links and no indication that they can modify things. This will be the last thing we do today. I did want to cover it because this is basically what I'm asking you to do in your assignment. So the first thing is here, this musician details link. Right now it's just hard-coded as HTML, so this link is here all the time. So I'm actually going to cut this and I'm going to wrap it in an if statement. So if our session user ID isn't empty, and then I'm going to paste that into an echo command. So now this link is only going to be visible if we have a valid user in the session, if it's not empty. So if I refresh in Firefox, my add a new musician link will still be here, but in Chrome it should disappear. So when I reload in Firefox, my link is here, but in Chrome, it's gone. So we're going to use this same check. We'll put it around the delete links first, because that's a little easier. And then we'll also need it around the musician names, that an authenticated user can click on the band names and edit them, and an anonymous user, the band names are just printed as HTML to the screen. They're not links, so the user can't interact with them. So I'm going to take this same logic around my delete links. So I'm going to scroll down here. There isn't, Chia-Yin, good question. There isn't largely a big difference. If you wanted to use is set, it should work as well. I think there are some small, slight differences. I'd have to look at the exact difference, but yes, if you prefer is set. It is commonly used for that. Well, yes. So here we'll again say if not empty, or you could use if is set. Oops. I'm going to move this. Oh, I need this up above. Sorry, that's got to go here. So we have to close the photo column. And then we're going to put in another echo here. And I'm going to move this. So the delete links only show up. The delete links are only visible when the user's logged in. So we're going to close the photo column. And now show delete links only to authenticated users. Yeah, Walt, it's true. That's typically used if people build pages where the forms post to themselves. That's a way of checking when the page loads if the form has been posted. I prefer to post to different pages, so I tend not to use it for that, but you're right, it is commonly used for that. So now if I check again in Firefox, my page should be unchanged. But in Chrome, as an anonymous user, my delete buttons are gone. So we're almost done. One last thing, which is to turn these links into static text for an anonymous user. So this first column here, this also is going to need to be in an if-else statement. So if the user is logged in, we're going to show the names as links. Otherwise, we just want to print the name as HTML. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to close my column. So now we need our if statement. So again, we're going to check the session variable, the user ID. So this will get moved into our first condition. If the user's logged in, we want the names to be clickable. Otherwise, we are simply going to echo out name in plain HTML. So we're not going to use a link that the user can interact with. If they're anonymous, they just get plain HTML in the first column, but an authenticated user gets a link instead. So again, as an authenticated user, I have the full access to add, edit, and delete. As an anonymous user, now my links are gone. I have just a static website. So if I were to log in, once I log in, I have access. I can add, edit, and delete. I have full access to all the pages. As soon as I log out, I'm back to a read-only user. So this is basically everything. If you're doing option A for assignment 2, this is everything I'm asking you to do with your assignment. To build a logout screen, make your navigation bar dynamic, so it works this way, that an authenticated user sees their username and log out, an anonymous user sees register and log in, and the anonymous user, for an anonymous user, your website becomes read-only. They can look at the data, but they can't make any changes. In order to make changes, to add, edit, and delete, they need to log in. So not only do they see the links to make changes, but also the pages are protected. So the save, your form, and your delete, all of these features are only available to someone who's logged in. And you'll also need to include file uploads in a similar way that we did today. If there are questions, I'm gonna push all my code up to GitHub now. And if you have questions, then I'm happy to hang around and answer some questions. Probably also help if you enable screen sharing with me. So I will have to save and record. Sorry, I will have to save and upload to YouTube, but I will be able to do that. I'm going to stop recording, but any questions just before I stop the recording? I'm going to push everything up to GitHub now as well for your reference. All right, well, I'm not hearing any questions. So as I said, so the code is on GitHub for you to reference. So remember, part 2 of the assignment is due next Wednesday. So we will have a quiz in class next week, but it will be available online all day until midnight next Thursday. If you need help with your assignment, send me a meeting request through the Outlook calendar. It'll come into my Outlook calendar, and we can have a meeting either on WebEx or on Zoom where you can share your screen with me and we can look at things. Okay, so if you're signing off now, have a good rest of your week and a good weekend. As I said, I'll hang out for anybody who has some questions. I think, Justin, you did have a question as well. And Ken, thank you also for your time today, as always, much appreciated.